This may be the last week of the buy low and sell high videos. All I ask is, can you go to the comment section and let me know when your trade deadline is? Because if a lot of y'all don't have your trade deadline for another couple weeks, then maybe we'll do another buy low video next week. But if not, the last guys you should be buying low on, we have 5 receivers, 2 running backs, starting with Josh Downs. Looking at Downs, I understand that this past week wasn't super disappointing by any means, but I know a lot of people are focused in on what we've actually had with the wide receiver personnel here in Indianapolis, where you had no Michael Pittman Jr., so maybe you were expecting to see a little more Josh Downs than you typically had. However, Downs was actually down at 69% of the snaps here in Indy. And instead, if you look at the wide receivers that were playing the majority of this game, the wide receivers that actually had a decent amount of production as well, that was both Alec Pierce as well as Adonai Mitchell. I mean, Adonai Mitchell was up there at 60 snaps. Alec Pierce was at 55 snaps. And this is a comparison to Josh Downs only at 44. So what we are seeing is a very clear role for Downs in this offense, as more so the slot wide receiver, the guy that's going to be out on the field in only 3 wide receiver sets. But yeah, it doesn't matter if Michael Pittman Jr. plays or he doesn't. Downs won't be seeing the field in 2 wide receiver sets. But all I ask is, does that matter? Because from my point of view, I think it's kind of irrelevant. Because what I think matters a little bit more so is going to be the expected target volume that Josh Downs should have in this offense. And if we go through and look at what Downs has done every single week that Flacco's been under center, this is a wide receiver that is closing in on averaging about 9.5 targets per game with Flacco under center. If you're looking at his total fantasy points this season, he missed the first 2 weeks due to injury. And however, Josh Downs is still the wide receiver 20 in total fantasy points. This is despite some absolutely atrocious Anthony Richardson games mixed in, such as the game against Chicago where Downs only had 5.2 points, such as the game against Miami where Downs only has 1.3. But more so, when you have Flacco, Downs is averaging anywhere from 15 to 20 points per game and should be viewed as, at minimum, a wide receiver 2 every single week that you have Flacco under center. And we've already had this coaching staff come out and repeatedly tell us they're not going back to Anthony Richardson. If we go over and look at the trade finder on the site right now and see what the price point is for Josh Downs, I see someone's able to trade Rico Dowdle for Downs straight up. If you needed some wide receiver help here, I think that's a phenomenal pivot, knowing how bad of an offense Dowdle is in. I see a trade where somebody was able to trade JSN and Rachaad White for Chuba Hubbard and Josh Downs. And while, of course, last time we saw JSN, the man was phenomenal. I mean, JSN's crushed the past 2 weeks. That's been with no DK Metcalf. Once you have Metcalf back in, I'm a little bit concerned of where the targets go here in Seattle. So I would rather have Josh Downs over JSN myself. I think the vast majority of people here would probably prefer Chuba over Rachaad White. The other trade we're looking at is somebody traded Tyrone Tracy and Jacoby Myers for Josh Downs, Chuba Hubbard, and Ladd McConkey. One of these players is actually also on this buy low video. And then the last deal we're looking at with the trade finder is somebody trading Cooper Kupp and Isaiah Pacheco for Tony Pollard and Josh Downs. I really want to reiterate, this is an absolute garbage trade. For the love of God, do not be paying this price for Josh Downs. But we'll be talking about Pacheco later in the video as a potential buy. But looking at where I have him in my rest of season ranks, I have Josh Downs right in the same range as guys like T. Higgins, Zay Flowers, and Amari Cooper. And honestly, Amari is going to roll us right into our next buy low candidate. I'm going to be very clear. I know that everybody is tired of hearing us talk about Amari Cooper. Clearly, 2-3 weeks ago, it was a great idea buying low on the wide receivers that switched teams, that started off slowly because they weren't playing the snaps. I mean, obviously, we talked about buying low on Hopkins with KC. We talked about buying low on Buffalo with Amari. But the issue is we haven't had the ability to see Amari actually take his role the way that you've had DeAndre Hopkins. Sadly, Amari's missed the past 2 weeks, but I do want to reiterate, I still view Amari as the wide receiver 1 for Josh Allen going into the future. You have Keon Coleman already ruled out for week 11. Dalton Kincaid injured now as well. Amari practiced all last week. He practiced all the week before. So If Amari is healthy and if Amari is good to go, then at that point, base expectation is going to be that this is somebody that's had enough time with Josh Allen, this wide receiver that's had enough time to learn the playbook, that when he gets in, he should be running the full slate of snaps. Looking at what we have with recent trades in the trade finder, somebody traded Najee Harris for Amari Cooper. Give me Amari Cooper. I actually have Najee in the flock league. I'd love to trade him for Amari there. Somebody traded Cortland Sutton for Amari Cooper. I have a lot more faith with Josh Allen than I do Bo Nix rest of season. Somebody traded Alexander Madison for Amari, where I don't even know if Madison's still the starter in Las Vegas. So yeah, we really haven't seen anything with Amari. At most, he's had... the last game he had 10 or more targets was back in week 5 when he was still in the Browns. But I view him as the wide receiver one here in Buffalo, and the other wide receivers are getting hurt. I still think that he's a great buy low candidate. Now, our next buy low candidate with Deontay Johnson, I want to be very clear. I don't think Deontay Johnson turns into some must-start wide receiver 2 every week. I don't even think Zay Flowers that. But if you are in a deeper format where you potentially start 4 or more wide receivers, that's where you're excited to pick up Deontay Johnson. Either if somebody drops him, sends him to the waiver wire, you're right there to scoop, or if you can just get him as a throw-in in a potential trade. Now, obviously, with Deontay Johnson, he has done absolutely nothing since week 6. And this past week, Lamar goes nuclear against Cincinnati, and Deontay doesn't even see the field. The man plays 8% of the snaps. Now, of course, with that being said, he gets traded to Baltimore week 9. Week 10, Baltimore has to play on Thursday night. So the expectation should have been Deontay Johnson wasn't playing at all. We're really not going to get to see Deontay Johnson in this offense until now in week 11. Now, like I said, is there any chance I'm starting in week 11? Hell no. I think that this is an addition as a throw-in for one of the last roster spots on your team. But looking at the trade finder, I think that that's kind of where he's priced at right now. And of course, if y'all wanted to check out the trade finder for completely free, we have a free trade finder on the site where you can go through and you can actually put in the exact league settings that you want to see, the exact player that you are wondering what the recent price is. And you can see all real fantasy football trades that have been made in real leagues involving the player that you're looking for with the league settings that you want. And also we have the free trade calculator for everybody over there on the site. It's just flockfantasy.com. I'll leave the link in the description and comment section. Completely free if you wanted to check it out, of course. But you can see some trades involving Deontay. Somebody trades Tank Bigsby for Deontay Johnson. I think Bigsby's maybe cuttable at this point. Somebody trades Romeo Doubs. Somebody trades Demario Douglas. And if you can pick up Deontay at this price point, or again, if you wanted to pivot wide receivers like you were willing to sell Flowers for Josh Downs and then get Deontay Johnson as a throw-in, I think that's the move we're looking to make. Now, our next wide receiver, I think, is a phenomenal buy low candidate. I actually sold him after his 29-point performance against the New Orleans Saints, but I may be regretting it a bit with Ladd McConkey. If we are looking at Ladd, this is a receiver that obviously does nothing this past week. You only see 2 targets. You only have 2 receptions. You don't crack 10 fantasy points. The passing volume is not there in this offense. But again, we've seen this kind of consistently, where in the games in which the Los Angeles Chargers aren't forced to throw the ball, they're simply not gonna. Really, the only time you're going to see the passing volume here is in the environment in which the Chargers fall behind. They have to go up against a good offense. That's not Tennessee. And they are going to be forced to get away from the run and actually throw the ball with aggression. And in that instance, we've seen Ladd McConkey consistently be the number 1 guy on this team in targets, where if you go through this season, pretty much every single game he's played, he's been anywhere from 6 to 8 targets. And the games in which the Chargers actually trailed, those are the games where the passing volume's there. And what's funny is if you look at this Chargers schedule going into the future, this is a really tough slate of games that they have. I know they've had some pretty easy matchups as of late, but going into the future, you actually have the Chargers playing the Cincinnati Bengals this week. It'll be a great spot for Ladd. Then the Baltimore Ravens, that's another great matchup. Then the Atlanta Falcons, then the Kansas City Chiefs, then the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Over the next 5 or so weeks, you're at a spot where you're actually probably going to see passing volume here in Los Angeles. I have Ladd McConkey ranked right in the same range as guys like Brian Thomas, Jackson Smith-Njigba, Darnell Mooney. And if you're looking at trades that I really would do that we found on the trade finder, somebody traded Jamison Williams for Ladd McConkey, no brainer, give me Ladd. Somebody traded Javonte, give me Ladd. Somebody traded Chubb, give me Ladd. I think that's honestly a really easy move. Now going over to our next wide receiver, the number one buy low candidate. And I understand that people don't like it when we bring up injured guys, blah, 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 saying, oh, you can't buy low on these. I promise you, I see it consistently. I bought low on DK Metcalf a week ago in the Flock League. You can trade 4 injured players at a discount. It is a thing. And Mike Evans is the easiest buy low candidate you could find in fantasy football at the moment, where not a lot of people are going to be talking about Mike Evans. He is not going to be on any practice reports this week. We're not going to get any news of him this week because the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are going to be on bye in week 11. And this is the perfect time to attack. Because if you go through and you look at this timeline for Mike Evans gets injured back in week 7. He misses weeks 9, 10, and I guess 8 as well. I'm an idiot. And in week 11, he was going to miss regardless. Regardless if Evans was 100% healthy, you're going to have to go through the bye week, similar to if you have, say, Jamar Chase. Jamar Chase has to go through his bye week in week 12. You have Zay Flowers. You have Josh Downs. Those guys have to go through their bye week in week 14. And if we look at the timeline here for Evans, if they thought Evans was going to be missing week 12, expectation would have been that they would have placed him on the IR the second that we had that hamstring injury. But no, this should have been about a 4-week injury. Seems like Evans should be good to go coming out of the bye week in week 12. So as it stands right now, Mike Evans should almost be viewed just as if he is a healthy wide receiver. And if we go through and look at Mike Evans and what he was able to do so far this season, obviously he had been very up and down. I'm not really going to look at the game against Baltimore because he gets injured right at the very beginning. But if you look at the first 5 weeks, you have 3 games with 20 plus fantasy points, but the target volume hadn't consistently been there based off Chris Godwin absolutely dominating. Well, now you've seen actually that no other receivers here in Tampa are really going to be competitive with targets for Mike Evans. So I think Evans comes into this offense and actually gets up to 8, 9, 10 targets a game with what has been an absurd touchdown rate through his entire NFL career. And obviously Baker Mayfield has been at the very top of the NFL in total passing volume this season. So I think you can strongly make an argument that Evans is a wide receiver 1 rest of season. I have him in the same range of our rankings as Garrett Wilson, DK Metcalf, as well as Deebo Samuel. And looking at some trades that I would view as an absolute no-brainer, I know that some people are maybe going to get upset with this, but if you could trade Terry McLaurin for Mike Evans right now, I would. As realistically speaking, like we were discussing already, Terry McLaurin has the bye week in week 12. Evans has that bye week this week, but if you operate under the assumption that Evans is good to go coming out of the bye, effectively, you actually have Terry and Evans playing the same amount of games rest of season. So really the only thing you should focus in on here is going to be the points per game rest of season. And I think you're going to have more passing volume in Tampa. And without having Chris Godwin in this offense, Evans should take an insanely high rate of this. Somebody traded Najee and Zay Flowers for Mike Evans. The last deal is hilarious. Somebody traded T against Jacoby Myers for Evans. I'm understand Evans is a wide receiver 1 rest of season here and definitely needs to be treated that way. Now going over to our next injured player that I think you should go out and put feelers for. I know people are going to say, you can't trade for injured guys. If you go back to when we talked about buying low on McCaffrey about a month ago, people in the comment section are screaming at me that McCaffrey wasn't coming back. People in the comment section are screaming at me that McCaffrey was a wasted roster spot and blah, 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 blah. I think now you have to do the same thing with Isaiah Pacheco. In that if you are looking at Pacheco, the second that you get him back at practice, the same thing's going to occur that happened with McCaffrey is when he's back at practice, that's when everybody's going to be in the live streams. That's when everybody's going to be in the comment section asking, should I go buy Pacheco? It'll be too late at that point. And going back to what we were talking about previously, if you look at the initial estimation that you had with this Pacheco injury, it was going to be anywhere from about 2 to 3 months that he should be missing. And this was suffered back in week 2. So he has missed weeks 3, 4, 5, 6. That's 1 month. 7, 8, 9, 10. That's 2 months. So we're now in the timetable where you should start expecting that Pacheco possibly is back at practice soon. And once that does happen, you're not going to be able to buy Pacheco. So Pacheco, we have moved up in our rankings up into the same range as guys like J.K. Dobbins, DeAndre Swift, as well as Brian Robinson. Now, the hesitation that I'd have with Pacheco is twofold. One, Obviously, the Chiefs are not incentivized whatsoever to go through and try to rush Pacheco back in. This is a team that's undefeated. This is a team that their really only aspiration should be to win a Super Bowl here. So I'm not thinking that all of a sudden Pacheco's a must-start running back in Week 11 by any means. They definitely can take their time bringing him back in. And the second thing is the playoff schedule for the Kansas City Chiefs is actually very tough here with Pacheco, to be honest with you. So it's kind of an awkward spot because you have no business going out there and trading for the injured guy if you are a team that needs to win games right now. You're only trading for Pacheco if you're a playoff team, but his playoff schedule kind of sucks. But I mean, with some of these deals, I think the price point is strong. Saw somebody trade Jacoby Myers for Pacheco. That's laughable. Give me Pacheco there. Somebody traded Brian Robinson for Nick Chubb and Isaiah Pacheco. I'll take the risk that you have with Pacheco and Chubb. Again, I do want to reiterate, I'm viewing Pacheco as a low-end RB2 rest of season because I do think you have some inherent uncertainty, but obviously he did show the running back one upside at the very beginning of the season, even if it was for a small little stretch. But if you give Pacheco the Kareem Hunt workload, he should be an RB1 in the fantasy playoffs, even if it is a tough schedule. Now, our last buy low candidate, possibly of the season, we'll see when your trade deadlines are in the comment section, will be James Conner. Looking at James Conner here, back-to-back weeks, garbage snap rates, where you see only 48% of the snaps against the Bears, and you see only 54% of the snaps against the Jets. You have Trey Benson working himself in here. This past week, obviously, you only have 33 rushing yards for James Conner. Benson looks like an efficient back. And I think a lot of people are going to be under the assumption that this is just the typical trend of what's occurring. That obviously, as you go through rookie season, we're going to expect that the rookie continues to expand his role. We're going to expect that the rookie continues to improve. And we are going to expect that the veteran kind of falls to the background. But my thing here, if you're looking at Conner, is the past 2 weeks may not be super predictive of the future, given the fact that both games were absolute blowouts. Neither contest was close where, the Cardinals boat racing the Bears and boat racing the Jets. If you go back to the 2 weeks prior where the games were close against Miami and Los Angeles, there James Conner saw 80 and 84% of the snaps. Plus, James Conner actually has the best fantasy football playoff schedule of any running back in the NFL. So for me, I think if you're looking at these trades that we found on the Trade Finder, it's a completely fair price point, and I'd be still standing by James Conner as a mid to high-end RB2 rest of season. But I really appreciate you. Really hope I was able to help you out here. Again, I want to reiterate, make sure you're taking advantage of the Trade Finder. If you're going to make a trade, at least throw it in the Trade Finder, see what it says. But make sure if you're using the Trade Finder on the site and the trade calculator on the site, you go through and you update it with your exact league settings, because we've done a lot of fine tuning with the trade calculator to make sure it's adjusted to your specific league settings in your league. But I'll leave the link to both of those over on flogfantasy.com in the description and the comment section, but definitely can help you make better trades and honestly better waiver wire moves in your league as well. But thank you again. I appreciate you, and I really hope we get to see you out in the live stream later tonight.